In this episode, I talk about learning and earning in your career and why, if you're doing neither, you should probably leave. Welcome to Monologues by Hassie. A common piece of wisdom that a lot of people are given, especially earlier in their careers, is that you should either be learning or earning, and ideally you should be doing both. But as it often happens earlier in your career, you're going to be looking for opportunities where you are learning. And the reason is you don't have a lot of career capital, your skills are still developing. And so it's very much the case that when you start off in your line of work, you're typically not going to be earning huge sums of money. Of course, that doesn't apply to everyone, but that is typically the case. So really, you're looking for opportunities to be in businesses and work for people where you can really learn from them. And later on, ideally, you will be in a position to leverage those learnings and earn. So if I look back at my own experience when I was coming out of university, it was a bit of an interesting one because I had job offers to be a chemical engineer, but then also go work for a technology team in the government. And I kind of optimized for a bit of both earning, learning, but also some lifestyle factors. The chemical engineering job would have taken me well outside of civilization as far as being in a city goes. And I think after spending so many years in university, I really wanted to have an office job. And so that was back then. And then I think very importantly, when I came to the end of my 3 rotations in government, which was a great experience in and of itself, it gave me a lot of breath. So I think a graduate program like that, where you're getting rotated between, in my case, 3 very different departments. I was in a technology team, I was in an insurance team, and I was in a housing and homelessness strategy team. So 3 very different things. And they're wonderful experiences, right? Because now looking back, whilst I may not have had depth in any of those areas, now that I've got depth in one area, I've had exposure to them. So having that learning and being kind of interdisciplinary is very important. But when I was coming out of government, I knew I had to leave government. This is actually a point where I was, to a certain degree, optimizing for earning. Because when I came into the New South Wales government, I knew that there was a particular band I wanted to get, and that was kind of my target. So I was like, if I can't get that band in government, then I'm going to do it outside of government. So I looked to the private sector to get that kind of postgraduate boost. And I did. I remember I had 3 job offers, and they all came in at the time at about, I think it was between like 110,000 to 120,000 base salary. And I didn't actually take the job that offered the most money and had the bonuses, which was Commonwealth Bank. It's one of these things where, many years after, I do wonder what my life would have been like if I just went and worked for the big yellow bank. And, in Australia, we're an economy where it seems like what everyone does, at least in circles where, really smart people who went to school, selective schools and private schools, and they all end, a lot of them, I shouldn't say all, because that's not true, but a lot of them end up in, big 4, like in the consulting firms or the audit firms, or, working for banks. And it just kind of seems to be where everyone goes. But back then I was also optimized, and I knew I would have learned a lot at the Commonwealth Bank. I remember the hiring manager at the time, I had a lot, and I still have a lot of admiration for that person because they were incredibly smart, and I just knew I would have learned a lot under them. But I also knew I was going to be doing that in the framework of being in a big yellow bank. Now, maybe that would have led to a bit more stability in my life and a discounted mortgage interest rate, but you've got to let bygones be bygones. So I actually optimized for the startup world because that's where I thought that I was going to be learning the most. And to be fair, that is 100% true. By taking that step, even though I wasn't getting exposed to like the bonus that bank employees get paid and things like this, what I did get was the opportunity to go from data analytics, data engineering to software engineering. And there was a lot of work involved on my own behalf of upskilling and training for that. But being in that environment early on gave me the opportunity to kind of change my career, and to the point where, I'm very comfortable, like much more comfortable building things. Like technology doesn't scare me as much as it used to. If I rewind to like 6, 7, 8 years, even if something is out of grasp, I have an understanding of what happens inside, and that is super important. So I'm very happy that I was able to learn all the way back then when I came out of my graduate program. So joining a startup was a wonderful opportunity. And this goes for most young people. I think you should be optimizing for learning. It is super important. And this means that, yeah, maybe those jobs aren't paying amazing. Like, obviously, they should pay to a point. Like, you shouldn't be like struggling, but you might not be living life large, right? You might be on a very tight budget, but you want the opportunity to be surrounded by great people who you can learn from. And that is a very important thing. If there's no one in the organization that you can learn from, if it's like you're a grunt and there's very little formal or informal training provided. Remember, training doesn't always need to be formal. You could simply have a very good mentor in the business or somebody you're working under that you're learning from, right? So I'm not talking about necessarily having, like, for example, in my graduate program, 3 structured rotations. You might not have that, but there needs to be a component of learning. And if that doesn't exist, this is where, you probably should be looking for another opportunity. Now that I'm a bit older and I've built a bunch of interdisciplinary skills and I've done these side quests, right? When I took a job as a sales development rep, that was a learning journey for me. It was a significant pay cut, and even succeeding in that role would have been a significant pay cut. And nonetheless, I'm very grateful I did it because it gave me such a valuable experience. So there's many experiences I've had. And the interesting thing is, after having all these learning experiences, I took a data engineering contract at my old company. And one thing was very clear. It was clear how much I'd matured as a person and a professional. I now had all these these interdisciplinary experiences and knowledge and skills, and I really took advantage of learning in those early days. Not to say that I don't do it now, but I remember back when we had budgets to buy books and budgets to buy, and this is my first time at the company I worked for when I was younger, when there were budgets to go to, like, not necessarily a budget to do a course, but if there was like an additional paid day of leave that you could use if you were self-funding a course, I did this. And I remember paying for so many different types of training to do, like, company executive training so I could understand how board reporting works and things. Like, I paid thousands of dollars to learn all these weird abstract things like contract law and public speaking. And I'm grateful I did it because it's helped me become more well-rounded. And the reasons I did it at the time, I said, yes, I'm a software developer or a data engineer, but I'm working with a lot of lawyers, so I would like to understand a very small percentage of what they do because that will help me work better with them in the future. And it absolutely has. And I was able to see the results of that when I came into my most previous contract, again as a data engineer. So kind of stepping into a role that I've had in the past, but obviously very different. The technology is different. I was working on a what you would call a legacy code base. It's already been built for me. I'm not making the architectural decisions, but I am gutting things out and improving them. And it was interesting in the sense that there was so much I was able to do, but by the time I got to the end of my employment contract, and the beauty of, I think, having a fixed term employment contract is whether anybody else is aware of it or not, I personally know that having a timeline on your work contract, even if there is a possibility for you to come to work the next day, for me that was a big moment of self-reflection, and I had to ask myself the all-important question: Hassie, are you earning or are you learning? And look, the money wasn't bad, but Sydney is an expensive city. I had just been evicted from what was relatively affordable rent, and I knew that the money that I was on wasn't really going to take me to any place that's worthwhile. So whilst it was a good salary, I think it was good maybe relative to 2 to 3 years back. And the cost of living and inflation has risen to a point where I was no longer satisfied working for that money. And then when I thought about how much I was learning, I don't think I was learning as much as I wanted to. And being in a role where you are dealing with so many clients and you have all the skills built, you're this pre-built entity. Like, they did not have to train me. I could slot into the business and start delivering value from day one. And I didn't just deliver value in my, what my job title said I did. I was helping train graduates. I was working with the customer team. I was actually saving a few client interactions, client engagements that had gone sour. So I was doing significant stakeholder and project management as well. And I realized that, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm not being remunerated for this. And at the same time, I'm not really gaining skills because I've come back to a company I've worked for before. So I'm not particularly learning new domain knowledge. I'm not being exposed to new processes. I'm a manager of chaos, a manager of business processes. I'm somebody who just really fits into the business and delivers value very easily. Now, the reason I took that fixed term contract so seriously and really thought about whether I'm earning and learning is the world is changing as well. I only recently spoke about AI, but the economy, the white collar economy especially, is changing so much because any job where previously you worked on a computer and it was, you were doing maybe the same or similar things over and over again, these are primed for automation in the age where we have LLMs and automation. I say this with asterisks. You can listen to my podcast on AI, how I kind of distinguish between using an LLM versus, I think, what I consider to be a deterministic automation, which is having something coded. We're not going to go into that right now. But I think the white collar world changing as fast as it is, I realize being in a position where I'm neither learning or earning is significant opportunity cost. There is a huge opportunity cost when I'm neither learning or earning in an environment where the world and the economy is moving so rapidly. In the sense that if I look at my time is being consumed. So my ability to learn outside of that is significantly compounded. And then I'm really only earning to kind of keep my head above water. So it was not an ideal situation. And so I, did probably what a lot of people think is going to be an absolutely crazy move, in that I told them I didn't want to renew my contract. And months prior, mind you, like 4 months prior, I booked a flight to Bali to create time to go and learn and build things again. Now, I did this, like I said, I spent a lot of time learning in my 20s. I did this 2 or 3 years ago, where I spent a year trying to launch digital products, and they were, like, for the most part, all failures, but I learned so many processes. Like, I got an app into Play Store. Like, it's not a big thing, but from where I was at the time, somebody who was a developer who worked as a tiny cog in a company to now somebody taking responsibility for a whole project, I was able to kind of fail and learn how to be like a bad project manager. And then now I'm happy to say that I'm a much better project manager than I used to be. And it's because I've had those experiences. So I realized that, okay, I'm not learning here. I'm not earning here. At the very least, if I was earning, I could say, great, you now have capital to mitigate some of the risks and some of the tailwinds that are going to be coming for white collar professional work from the AI LLM revolution, or, maybe some of the short-sighted decisions that are taken if people believe that AI will take over all the jobs. So I realized how important it is to either A, be paid enough to join the capital class, however slowly, and therefore you can benefit from AI without necessarily having to be the person who works with AI or in AI, or you need to be rapidly acquiring the skills that make you valuable. Now, AI has meant that a lot of people can execute. The cost of execution, at least for now, is very, very low. And that's a wonderful thing. People can use tools like Lovable and create apps and do all of this. And this is why I think in the modern age, learning is actually more important, which is ironic because there's a lot of high school teachers and university professors and, generally speaking, formal academic institutions who are now saying that they're seeing that the students are doing even worse. Like, they might submit essays that are better because they can use AI, but when it comes to retention and understanding, this is all, this has been reduced. This is cognitive offloading applied to students. But I think in a world where the execution costs and the technical ability to execute digital solutions has dropped so low, or it's dropped, significantly lower than it used to be. It is actually more important to learn because human taste and human judgment becomes one of the most important things. So for me, it's actually sharpening your brain, which is one of the costs of working in the AI world. If you're in a company where they've cut staff and they've given you access to agents and LLMs, and they are telling you to produce more work, well, you're doing more work than you used to, and so you're probably, for a lot of white collar workers in that situation, you're doing a significant amount of cognitive offload. And therefore, I was like, okay, great. This is actually a lose-lose situation because you're not making enough to join the capital class. You're actually becoming stupider because of the way you're working. So it's a double whammy. So I knew I had to leave. And this is how I've justified it. And it's now been almost kind of 3 weeks since I've been working on my own projects, and you can check it out. There's, the link won't be around forever, but I'm working on some economic modeling for the Australian energy grid. It's something I did in university, and picking that up after 7 years has meant I've had to learn so many things. Like there was a day where I spent in the office actually looking at equations to calculate like solar zeniths to understand, where is the position of the sun in the sky at any time of the day, at any hour for a certain latitude and longitude. And I had not seen trigonometry in such a long time. And so like these are very, very important experiences for me because I'm relearning a domain that I've forgotten a very long time ago, and I'm actually doing a much better job because I'm a better project manager than when I was a student in university. I now have formal software engineering experience, which has taught me many good habits on how to build and structure software, so I can do a better job at that. I have failed at launching digital products. So from day one when I started my project, which is currently called NEM Sim. It's on my GitHub. It's public. The name might change in the future, but the important thing is I actually made sure I deployed a web app from day one, even if it was incomplete, because I realized that one of the biggest execution risks is working on something that no one sees, and you keep pushing that final kind of release, the front end presentation layer. So that actually came out straight away. And every time I work on something in the back end and update this model, I update the front end as well. So that has been, these are all learnings I've made. And I already know that this is valuable. Like there's skills and opportunities that I'm going to be able to leverage through this. I still have been using LLMs to develop, which obviously increases my capacity to do things. And for example, I wanted to learn Bahasa Indonesia. And because I'm in Indonesia right now, and for the last 3 weeks, I've been using broken Bahasa to kind of speak in order and try and be understood in certain situations. And I thought that it would be very valuable if in the span of 2 hours, I could learn Bahasa Indonesia. So I launched a site called warungready.com. And the whole purpose is it's how do you get to a warung, which is a restaurant, and be ready to speak and order and communicate and express thanks and that you enjoyed your meal. And the goal is I don't want a language course, just within the span of 2 hours. How can I learn enough that I can make people smile? That was my metric. How can you make people smile? And this is all about learning. This requires time. And why is this important? I think, I spoke previously, like translators are one of the highest kind of their jobs and pay has been significantly impacted by the release of ChatGPT and all the LLMs that have the tools that use LLMs that have come after it. And despite the fact that people might not be hiring translators as much, I think in the new world we're in, learning skills like languages, I think, is super valuable, right? You don't want to be the person using whatever like Google Meta glasses that has auto translate. There is something very human and organic about making mistakes and slipping up and being able to communicate to somebody. So I think a lot of these things that people think that AI is destroying, and maybe the feeling, the notion, especially amongst young people, that why learn properly, right? Because they're using AI to optimize for their assessments. And in using AI to optimize for doing well on assessments, the process of learning suffers in, like, they might not realize that the what they're actually supposed to be learning is suffering in the process. And so I think that's really important because we do not know what the world is going to look like in 3 to 5 years. If AI doesn't become this kind of massive game-changing thing, then you don't want to have sacrificed the learning opportunity that are currently available to you because you're going to need it. But at the same time, if it does transform the world, then you're going to want to be learning with that transformation. So in 2026, we're kind of on this potentially a big cusp where the world changes. I can neither afford to subsidize companies with the skills I've already developed if I'm not earning enough. And like Sydney is not a cheap place. And I'm at the point where I'm in my early 30s. I'm still single, but I am obviously thinking about having a family and making sure I can look after them and provide a good quality of life for them. So I'm not really interested in subsidizing companies with my skills and talents unless that's remunerated at an adequate level that both I'm happy and the company's happy, right? If I'm a bit of a nutcase for saying if you're not getting paid enough and you're not learning enough, walk away from your job. But that's exactly what I've done again. And at the same time, in this era where we currently are at this kind of technological cusp, and we're starting to see LLMs creep into white collar work. It's proliferating in fields outside of software. It's becoming bigger in law. It's, translation, as we spoke about, accounting. It's becoming so much broader in other white collar fields where you have digitized documentation where people use computers because there's context there. There's work that can be sent to an LLM. And you want to be learning. If this transformation truly does happen, you want to be staying prime, remaining a learner, so you can grasp the opportunities that are available. And B, I think, like I said, I'll reiterate again, human taste, decision-making, judgment is one of the most important things. And for that reason, it's never been more important for me personally to make sure that I am still learning. And I'm doing that now, fortunately. Like I said, I was looking at trigonometry. I was thinking about solar zenith calculations. I'm thinking about battery storage. I'm learning what is essentially a new domain to me because it was so long ago when I did my university thesis. And there are so many cognitive benefits to that. I've also stepped back on my LLM usage to actually do a lot more of the thinking, do a lot more of the initial scaffolding of the software by hand before I hand it to an LLM. And I think that is very important as well. So I'm not going to diverge. I realize that I am getting a bit sidetracked on this point, but there is a very important question that everyone needs to be asking themselves. Are you earning or are you learning? And ideally, you want to be doing both. At the very least, you should be doing one or the other. But if you're doing neither, it is probably time to quit your job. That is advice that has been around for a very long time, and it is very good advice. So I'm going to end this episode here. And to all of those of you who are listening to this, I wish you great success on all your endeavors. You've just made it through another episode of Monologues by Hassie. It brings me great pleasure to know that you made it to the end. To listen to more episodes, subscribe on your favorite podcast app or visit monologuesbyhassie.com. Thanks for swinging by.